We are certainly seeing a resurgence of mech-based games today. From Software's Armored Core 6 was a hit with fans that helped bring newcomers into the fold due to the studio's pedigree. Daemon X Machina showed up with its more lighthearted anime flair and did pretty well too. Titanic Scion is a sequel that introduces open-world exploration in a bigger and more complex package, but is bigger necessarily better in this case? Well, let's find out. The biggest change from the first Daemon X Machina is the shift from a mission-based stage structure to a full-blown open world. There are pretty much none of the typical open world growing pains present here, with one exception: how it looks. The ground below, or hell as the denizens like to refer to it as, is basically a barren wasteland of PS3 era textures. There are some different biomes to vary up the look, but it's all just different shades of uninspired crags and rocks. Some biomes have weather effects like rain or swamp acid that boosts or drains certain parameters of your mech. This is nifty on the gameplay front, but still doesn't offset how bland and samey the environments are in this game. The visuals in general look 2 generations stuck in the past. Even the anime-adjacent art style has trouble making up for the low-quality textures, the lack of environmental details, and drab locations overall. At least the mechs do look rad, because hardly anything else really does. But beyond the bland open-world aesthetic, the studio has managed to more or less craft a functional open-world structure on its first large-scale attempt. Fast travel in particular is expertly implemented. As you explore regions of the map, which are often separated by tunnel systems, you come across byways overrun by enemies. Byways are your fast travel points. Once liberated, these can be freely warped to anywhere on the map screen, providing instant fast travel across the world. It's a convenient way to encourage exploration while cutting down on needless travel time. Speaking of, the world map itself is more or less average in size by today's game standards. It doesn't feel too overblown or conversely too small. It's just too bad the environmental design is so lacking here. While the terrain doesn't seem copy and pasted, it again lacks identity across its biomes, feeling sort of like a giant barren wasteland with little to actually love about it, but I guess they do call it hell for a reason. Some of the activities you can engage with while roaming the overworld include world bosses, stray skirmishes, beacon signals, side missions, and, my favorite of the bunch, mining. Ore is useful for its ability to craft various materials, but to mine it you need to engage with a fun little minigame. Lining up the circle in time with your ore strikes is a simple yet still fun enough diversion from the usual mecha combat. But that's not the only diversion in this game. There's also a collectible card game called Overbullet that can be played with various NPCs around the Fort Hub area, and there's also bouts in the Coliseum to engage in as well. All of the various points of interest are very cleanly represented by icons on the map. One feature I wish more games adopted is infinite pin placement. This game actually has it, which is great, along with a handy function to delete all pins at once. The map also does a good job distinguishing different terrain types, which does make navigation even smoother. One of the icons that sparked my curiosity was the outline of a horse. To my delight, the world has a number of wild horses that can be used as mounts. There's not much to it, considering your arsenal, your mech by the way, is just as fast, if not faster, but hey, it's at least something different to interact with. There's also Warthog-style vehicles that can be both driven and used for their mounted turret. By far the coolest mount is the Transformer bike. Again, the function isn't very practical considering your arsenal/mech packs more speed and firepower than the bike and its laser arms, but there is still a level of cool factor that I really appreciate here. Of course, your main mode of traversal is your arsenal suit. The vertical distance you can cover in such a short span of time is fun and liberating. Once you get used to the controls, dashing, flying, and decelerating to land again feels intuitive. Flying around feels almost too fluid at times though, in a way I could sort of categorize as floaty. Acceleration and stopping happen on a dime, with little transition, which can sometimes make movement feel imprecise. I can't count the number of times I overshot a chest or loot pickup due to the sensitivity. In tight corridors like tunnels, the floatiness can lead to frustrating collisions. This isn't a deal breaker of course, but exploration and looting suffer because of it. Speaking of, looting is more streamlined than one might expect. Players can only take one item for each downed enemy, which encourages strategic planning and careful resource management. I like how this limitation forced me to weigh stats and utility of items as it developed a sense of familiarity with my equipment. The most rewarding and enjoyable open world activity is finding new loot to add to your arsenal. Arsenals are this game's main attraction, and perhaps the very best thing about it as a whole. There's just a ton of depth involved in crafting the perfect Arsenal mech build for combat and customizing how it looks. Customization is practically endless when it comes to your mech's visual appearance. Each part can be transmogged so that you don't have to decide between looks and stats. Just add your pieces in the customized exterior menu and you'll see them on your mech regardless of your actual equipment, which is fantastic. The coloring options are overwhelming in a good way, mind you. Each part has 3 color sections, 1 luminous piece, and you can even add patterns and customize your own decals. This visual customization is well suited to the emphasis on loot within the open world and makes it worthwhile to explore. Each mech is outfitted with a helm, cuirass, 2 vambraces, and greaves. These armor parts each contribute to a wealth of parameters ranging from weight, defense, health, resistances, ground speed, flinch resistance, etc. If that weren't enough min-maxing for players, some parts also include attachments which further boost parameters. The range of weaponry at your disposal is no less daunting. Suffice it to say, Titanic Scion features dozens of melee weapon types, dozens of gun types, as well as shields, auxiliary cannons, missiles, and even support airstrikes. These different types all feature unique gameplay functions as well as skills. Thankfully, the buffet of build options can be neatly organized and saved for posterity by setting up many different loadouts. Skills are acquired through a unique process called fusion. Defeating certain enemies drops genetic material that can then be absorbed, resulting in new skills. It appears needlessly complex at the outset, but is quite simple in practice, so don't worry. Just farm enemies for the skills you want, though there is a caveat. Your character gets physically mutated in the process, so if you care about preserving your looks, you'll need to pay a lot of credits to look normal again. The skills themselves are numerous here, ranging from unique weapon-based skills to general skills and passive enhancements. Suffice to say, between the hundreds upon hundreds of skills here, players aren't wanting for variety when it comes to mech abilities. Among mecha titles, Titanic Scion ranks near the top when it comes to visual customization and combat variety. However, the feel of combat doesn't quite live up to the depths of its various parts. Like the general movement, combat feels rather light and arcadey. There's a noticeable lack of weight in punches and firearm shots. Bazookas and oversized shotguns don't recoil when shot, and the sounds of the hundreds of different guns all sound unremarkable and just sort of generic. Further, the animations don't have that extra level of polish and spectacle, but what can be expected with such a sizable roster of equipment? I hope this doesn't come across as belittling here, but I find the combat to feel like somewhere in between Earth Defense Force and Armored Core 6, with it leaning in the EDF camp more. That said, the sheer number of weapon types, skills, and options at your disposal make this a mecha game strategic. But in terms of viscerality, the game clearly emphasizes mobility and speed over realistic gun mechanics or intricate animations. Even though movement can feel imprecise, combat doesn't tend to suffer as a consequence. This is because the targeting system is more or less easy to use, and is often preferable to free aim. Certain enemies have weak parts that limb targeting is especially useful for, allowing you to just instantly hit the enemy without worrying of flight trajectory and whatnot. I just find that there's often too much button mashing when relying on targeting like this. The best strategy I found for a lot of the common mobs is just to hold shoot or mash the melee attack as fast as you can while targeting them, which gets repetitive pretty quickly. Boss fights are where the combat gets particularly interesting, or I guess frustrating. Some bosses engage with all the mechanics and repertoire available to the player, resulting in an epic air and ground-based mecha battle, but others try a bit too hard to go in with gimmicks, resulting in an overtuned or boring fight. Some fights can drag on for 20 minutes at a time, such as the Colossus bosses roaming the overworld. This can be especially fun and engaging with a co-op partner though, and since this game supports full co-op crossplay, it's convenient to buddy up and take care of bosses, though I do lament the absence of local co-op of course. But it has to be said, some bosses are truly unsalvageable. One story boss was particularly arduous and lopsided in its difficulty curve at that point in the campaign. The boss battle in question has a unique gimmick that isn't even slightly hinted at so far. The game loves over-tutorializing every little thing that pops up, but the most important mechanic to overcome an overtuned boss fight? Nah, just let the player figure that out. The real problem is how padded boss health can be, especially with some of the lopsided difficulty cliffs that pop up here and there. Of course, given the game's open world structure, grinding for power and farming materials can be a solution to difficulty walls. At least the campaign isn't as padded as some of the boss health bars. The story covers around 15 hours of playtime, give or take, though of course the wealth of open world activities can extend your time well up into 100 hours. The narrative here is a continuation of the first game, following a special group of Outers and their resistance to their own government and its Axiom military. You begin being experimented on in the outer base referred to as Heaven, and then escape to the surface world often referred to as Hell, as mentioned before. There are some satisfying, if predictable, plot twists and character arcs here, but it's nothing spectacular. What I do like though is the voice acting. Plenty of familiar anime and RPG voice talent are represented here, and make the game and setting and story feel more lively and full of energy than it probably otherwise would. Unlike the first game, the narrative is structured with the open world in mind. In practical terms, this results in dynamic party banter while exploring, as well as datalog lore tidbits, and unfortunately no more of those cool mission briefings from the first game, which I do lament. As a result, the story feels slightly less epic and cinematic, and more informal and seamless than the first game, though the guitar-laden soundtrack certainly is as good as the original game. So, all in all, Titanic Scion is a flawed mecha game with extraordinary customization elements. Combat can be hit or miss, and the open world is a dull checklist of loot and places to go. The main draw isn't the story, but the narrative is adequate at least. If you're a big mecha fan, wait for a sale and you'll have a lot of fun with this one. For more casual players, I guess, try the demo first before committing. The best parts of the game are niche in nature, and the rest of the game won't make up for that. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.